So because the players in the actual NBA aren't doing anything, might as well talk about guys who are not in the NBA. Allen Iverson is the first one because I don't know. AI is one of the more interesting players to talk about, in my opinion, because from a cultural standpoint, what he did for the NBA is going to be felt forever. Not just necessarily the NBA, but basketball in general. And when we move on to what he did specifically on the floor, the case against him is that he was a ball hog and he was terribly inefficient. The case for him was that the team around him wasn't that great, shooting was not as much of a thing back in the day, and of course he did have the finals run. So where do I end up on all this? And I say this as I made a video like a few years ago saying if Iverson played in the NBA today, he'd be a lot better. And I don't know if I totally believe that video anymore, but I think I'm going to start with that finals run for Iverson. It was definitely like very impressive. And if you compare that run to some things that other great players did or didn't do, there might be an argument to be made that they can't top that thing, right? Now, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but there's a case to be made for it. I mean, you know, you compare Iverson to a guy like Steve Nash, and I mean, I'll just say, I think Nash was a better player. I think he had a better career. I think he was more consistent, playoff success, all that stuff. But could you argue his absolute best moment, whatever it is, did not match Iverson's absolute best moment? Yeah, potentially. There's also a case to be made about a suspension that he didn't deserve and whatever else. But I guess that should be always remembered with Iverson. That being said, do I think that finals run has become a little overrated? Yes. For a few reasons. Number one, I know that the Lakers and Kings series always gets talked about as the refs bailing a team out. If you do some research, the Sixers-Bucks Eastern Conference Finals may have actually been the biggest example of that. Also, AI had some horrific shooting games in that playoff run. Like, even worse than the normal Iverson thing. And the other reason I think it's overrated is because I think it diminishes everything else that happened in Iverson's career, which was a series of playoff disappointments and the constant questions of, can this guy really lead a team and all that? I mean, in a lot of ways, he was Westbrook before Westbrook, right? Where you look at the numbers and you're like, well, this dude averages over 30 a game, similar to Russ. But then when you're actually watching it day in and day out, you're looking at the efficiency numbers, you're seeing the offense at the end of games and the forced shots and all that, and you start to ask yourself, is this really as awesome as I might think it is? But at the same time, to defend Iverson, efficiency was not as much of an emphasis back when he played, and the one-man show was a little more encouraged. And again, the teams around him, for a decent stretch of the time, were not exactly offensively talented. All that being said, though, I don't think it was as not cared about as we would like to think sometimes. I think part of it is just because the internet wasn't as big, and Reddit and Twitter was either not around or not really as much of a thing as it is now. I have to assume there were people that were like, this dude's a ball hog, okay? And then if we want to, I guess, look at the years after the finals run for Iverson, they weren't exactly that inspiring. Larry Brown was out not long after it, and whether it was like a round 2 loss versus the Pistons, which, okay, that's probably fair. The year after they win 33, AI plays about half the season. Okay. But he did have 2 completely healthy years in 05 and 06. And both teams, well, one team didn't make the playoffs and the other one lost in round 1 to the Pistons once again. And yeah, I'm not going to act like those 2 rosters around AI were that great. I mean, there was young Iguodala, young Korver, C. Webb was either injured or just wasn't that great anymore. But I don't think those teams were completely terrible either. Like, I think they were good enough to be led to like a 45, 46, maybe even higher 40s in wins. And AI just wasn't able to do that. And you can make a case of efficiency or whatever the hell else. Defensively, I don't think AI was much to go nuts over. He could get steals, give him that. Could play the passing lanes and swipe at guys and all that, but I don't think he was really making the Sixers any better defensively. And then eventually he ends up on the Nuggets, and those were like a couple of blah playoff finishes. Chauncey Billups ends up in Denver, and suddenly the Nuggets get a lot better. I think that says some things. Whether it means Chauncey's a better all-time player than AI, I don't know, but in terms of team fit and all that, could definitely say something. And that's always the argument with AI. It's the numbers are great, but was the day in, day out, possession by possession basketball stuff really there throughout the entirety of his career? Or was it there for just a couple of short instances, a season stretch or whatever? And to be honest, I do think I end up on the cynical side with Iverson. I think if you gave me a choice of who to start my team with, then it's Iverson, and I don't really have a criteria to pick names, so I went to Basketball Reference's similarity scores thing, which I guess tracks win shares, which I don't really care for as a stat, but I can't think of anything else at the moment. Two interesting names on it, Jason Kidd and Manu Ginobili. I definitely would take Jason Kidd over Iverson. Granted, Jason had his efficiency problems too, but his playmaking and defense were way better than AI's, and I just don't think there's as much of a question about if Jason Kidd's going to make everybody around him better, like he definitely is, whereas with AI, not 100% confident on that one. Manu is a very interesting one. I mean, he was the third option on those Spurs teams, and I don't know. I mean, if he was a number one option, I'm not saying I would definitely take him over AI, but is there a chance he would average like 25 and 7 on really good efficiency? It's a possibility. I don't really know. But, I'm comfortable with saying like Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, whoever else. Yeah, I'll take those guys over AI. So there's my Allen Iverson take for you, I guess.